aka Literati medium. Today's the day I've certainly been waiting for since I started my channel. The idea that inspired it all! Today I'm going to compare and contrast the book Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo with its recent Netflix adaptation to see which I actually liked better. There will be spoilers for this video, so if you don't want to be spoiled for the book or the TV show, please turn back now. This is your final warning. I'm going to break down my comparison into three main categories: plot, characters, and relationships. That's right. You will find out who I ship and who I stan, if you even care. How this will work is that I will give points to either the show or the book based on which I actually liked better, and at the end, whichever one has the most points is the winner. Please keep in mind that this is just my subjective opinion. Let's start with plot. Overall, I have to say that the plot of the show is a lot stronger by far, which is kind of strange considering it follows the premise of the book actually pretty closely. Adding the crows to the storyline really helped pick up the pace in places that were dragging in the book. Just when you get tired of the whole Alina is learning how to control her powers and is a fish out of water storyline, you switch over to the crows and the excitement of planning a heist. I understand that this isn't really possible in the book because it's written in singular first person. However, maybe that's why singular first person stories aren't usually my favorite. I blame the empath in me. I need to know what everyone else is feeling. I also like how the show led up to and dealt with the climax a lot better. Showing Alina's connection to the stag early on really helps make the moment where she regains control over her powers through her connection to the stag make a lot much more sense. Also, not making Alina aware of Kirigan's search for the stag makes the fact that he withheld her letters to Mal pack that much more of a punch. Just like the Darkling withholds a lot of information from Alina, the show withholds a lot of information from the viewer that you get pretty early on in the book, such as the Darkling being long-lived and being a human amplifier. And revealing these things just a little bit later in the story really adds weight to the reveal that Kirigan is the Black Heretic. I also hated how the book handled the climax of the story. Alina regaining control over her powers in the book is all about trying to save Mal's life. It completely takes away any agency that Alina has as a character and then places it on the men in her life. It's even Mal's idea in the story to go after the stag, not Alina's. The show instead really focuses on Alina's violation at Kirigan's control over her powers, and you feel triumphant when she gets that control back from him. That's such a better story arc, not to mention a better example to set for young girls. Someone tries to take your power, you take it back. So, for the plot, the adaptation wins. Next, let's talk about characters. I'm going to start off with the more minor characters and then move on to the big three. For minor characters, I'm actually going to give a point to the book. While I did miss the crows, especially Jesper, and kind of hated Maria and Nadia with their gossipy mean girl vibes in the books, I have to give the point to the book for Genya, Baghra, and the Apparat. Genya in the show is pretty much what you get in the books, so obviously the book wins because it's the source material. The Apparat in the book is this creepy, fanatical Rasputin type character. When he shows up out of the shadows to talk to Alina, the description of him literally gave me chills. I felt as creeped out by the character as Alina did. You just don't get that feeling from the show. While the Apparat is a little off, he just doesn't have that creep factor for me. Baghra is where the minor characters really shine in the book. No offense to Zoe Wanamaker, it wasn't her fault. The writers failed her. There's this moment in the book that just really tore at my heartstrings. I'm going to read it to you. Before he'd ever dreamed of a second army, before he gave up his name and became the Darkling, he was just a brilliant, talented boy. I gave him his ambition. I gave him his pride. When the time came, I should have been the one to stop him. She smiled then, a small smile of such aching sadness that it was hard to look at. "You think I don't love my son," she said, "but I do. It's because I love him that I will not let him put himself beyond redemption." This moment was so wonderful in the book because you see this mother who knows he's the villain and still loves him anyway. I really wish we'd gotten that moment in the show. Let's talk about Mal. So when I was reading the book, I took notes, and then when I was getting ready to film this video, I sorted those notes into the different categories that I'm talking about. And when I went to go talk about Mal's character, I only had one note about Mal as a character. I'm glad I had the addition with the bonus materials of Mal's letter. Honestly, without that, Mal is pretty much a non-entity throughout the entire book. And when he does show up, he comes off as a fuckboy, toxically masculine, and jealous. I'm so glad that the show did not portray him this way. In the show, he's truly masculine because he can embrace his sensitivity. Also, he doesn't come off as jealous at all. He's a true feminist in the show, and I love it. Sorry about that. I forgot that I was baking my brother-in-law's cake while recording this video. Oops. Where was I? Oh, right. So Mal is a great feminist in the TV show. I love it, even though it was essentially rewriting his whole entire character. Alina. So I've talked a little bit about Alina leading up to this when I dealt with the plot, but I did not care for Alina in the books at all. There are moments that are good, such as when she's suppressing her powers, but that doesn't make up for the complete lack of drive that she has as a character. I hated the moment where Kiergan tells her about the amplifier and then she's just like, all right, I guess I'll just wait for that then. She would have been such a better character if she had still tried to become more powerful on her own. Now, the book did do something that I felt was missing in the show, and that's the part where she decides to let go of Mal. In the book, because it is slower paced, you do see that there is a span of time where she is figuring out who she is without him. You do not get that in the show at all. In the show, it definitely comes off as if she's giving up Mal to go to Kiergan. I'm also so over this girl is special but plain thing that's been in a lot of YA fantasy I've read recently. I understand that it's supposed to be relatable, but I'm not buying it. Here you have two gorgeous men willing to kill for you. You're not playing, regardless of what you think. I realize that as the book progresses and she starts to embrace her power, that she becomes less plain, and that suppressing her powers was obviously having a physical effect on her. And while that story is interesting, and they do mention it in a passing line in the show when Mal says how good she looks, but I really enjoyed that they decided to make her biracial in the show instead. It just makes sense in this universe where Ravka is pretty much at war with everyone. That way, any negative commentary about her appearance had to do with her being part Shu. While I'm upset about how they handled the switch over from Mal to Kiergan, I still have to give the point to the show because mainly Jessie May Lee is adorable and precious, and she made the character likable. The cake wasn't done the first time. So I have to give credit to the show for taking the worst character in the book and making him my favorite. Now, part of that may be Ben Barnes. God, I love that man. And have, ever since Prince Caspian. He had exactly the right amount of gravitas and charisma to make this character interesting. Also, by including a bit of his backstory, you do learn to sympathize with him a little bit more. He ends up being my favorite kind of villain. A villain who's doing things for the right reason, it's just his methods that make him villainous. The book tries to do this, but it's not executed very well. One of the things that struck me most about the Darkling's portrayal in the books is that everything he does is big. Anytime he uses his powers, he always claps with a big boom. In the show, he only ever does this when he is putting on a performance. There's no subtlety to the character in the book. I literally had this image in my head of a mustache twirling, cackling villain anytime he did this. Wahaha! I don't think that's what Lee was trying to do, but it came off that way. Also, I noticed in the books that he pretty much always has an entourage, like he's the popular guy in school. While it's obvious in the show that he has a lot of respect, especially from the Grisha, we usually see the Darkling when he's alone. This does two really important things for his character. One, it makes him seem more dangerous. That moment in the second episode where Kirigan shows up to save Alina and the shadows are just drawn to him, it's scary and charismatic as hell. In the book, he just arrives with a bunch of soldiers. His entourage really lessens his impact as the most powerful known Grisha. Kirigan doesn't need an entourage. He's dangerous enough on his own. Number two, the fact that we almost always see him alone really emphasizes his isolation. People avoid what they fear, and as I just mentioned, there's a lot to be afraid of when it comes to Kirigan. It makes the character more sympathetic. And again, this adds weight to the reveal that he's the Black Heretic later on in the show. In the book, the Darkling is also surprisingly impatient, which I just didn't find believable because he's this long-lived character. One of my favorite moments in the show is actually when he's in the tent with Mal and he says,
"I'm not going to kill you, Mel. I don't need to. Time will do it for me."
What makes it so scary is that he's right. If Alina is long-lived like the Darkling, even if she ends up spending a lifetime with Mal, I can see where Kirigan is thinking, well, it doesn't matter what we do now, whether it's be with someone else or completely decimate your enemies. Eventually, she will get lonely and she will come to me because I'll be the only person left. It's patient. It's calculating. It's scary while also somehow being sympathetic because it's rooted in his own loneliness. I felt completely robbed of that moment in the book. In the book, he just maliciously threatens to kill Mal. So he comes off more like this, wahaha, instead of like this. Ben Barnes. Thank you, Netflix and Ben Barnes, for making this character great. It's time for relationships! So you don't know this about me yet, but I can pretty much find a couple to ship in anything that I watch or read. I just find relationships a natural part of human life, and therefore I like my stories to have at least some romantic aspect. First, let's talk about Melina. I honestly can't stand this relationship in the books, and I'm going to read you a quote that sums up my reason why. "I missed you every hour, and you know what the worst part was? It caught me completely by surprise. I'd catch myself walking around to find you, not for any reason, just out of habit. Mel, that's not love, that's codependence." I don't know if it's just because we didn't see any of his perspective in the book. The letter doesn't count, but he doesn't even come off as interested in Alina, except for one passing moment of maybe some possible attraction. It's not until she's gone and then he realizes that she may be with the Darkling that he realizes his feelings. And those feelings present themselves in anger and jealousy and resentment. The book also does two things that I hated. There's this moment when he asks her if she left the little palace because of a lover's quarrel with the Darkling. And there's this moment that passes when she tells him no, where he pauses and stops to think. And it makes you think that if her answer had been yes, that he wouldn't have stuck around. That's true friendship right there. The second is that in passing, he says something that really makes it seem as if he resents her for his abandonment of the army. In all, I found Mal possessive and controlling and jealous, and these are all recipes for an emotionally abusive relationship. And as somebody who has been in an emotionally abusive relationship, everything about this pairing in the book made me cringe. I couldn't stand it. The TV show, in contrast, really had me embracing that little ghosts feeling that I did enjoy from the beginning and end of the book. The way the show handles their mutual pining for each other is just so sweet and pure and innocent, and I couldn't help but want the two to be together endgame. I also couldn't enjoy Darklina in the book either, for one major, very important reason. That's right, consent. The Darkling instigates every single romantic interaction in the book. He's always the one who touches her first. He kisses her first. Every single time. Due to the fact that his powers as a human amplifier floods a person with confidence, I honestly didn't know if Alina was legitimately attracted to him or if the effect of his touch being a human amplifier was mimicking attraction. It's the definition of dubious consent. No judgment if dubious consent is your thing, but it's definitely not mine. Also, again, I don't know if I would want a teenage girl reading about dubious consent and romanticizing it. I'm sorry for being the moral police here. It also came off as if he wasn't legitimately interested in her and was instead using his powers to control her. Does that make him more villainous? Maybe. Is it better storytelling considering we're supposed to believe he's actually interested in her until the reveal that he's the big bad evil guy? Definitely not. The show definitely fixed this problem and actually made consent a bigger theme in the relationship between the Darkling and Alina. In all of their early interactions, the only time the Darkling instigates touch or anything physical with Alina is when he's trying to amplify her powers. In the map room, she's the one who touches him first, and then he caresses her face. She kisses him first, and then he sees that he can take initiative. I mean, he even stops to ask her for consent when he's got her hand up her kefta. Oh, it's there. Again, this gives Alina more agency in her own story, and also makes it seem as if his feelings for her are at least partially genuine. Is he taking advantage of the situation? Absolutely. Do I also believe that it's more than just that? Also, absolutely. I mean, look at this face. This emphasis on consent early on in their relationship, again, really makes the moment and the betrayal of when Kirigan violates Alina's body with the amplifier to control her powers hurt so much more. It really adds weight to the best quote in the book.
Fine. Make me your villain.
It's such a good scene because it's the first time that you see Kirigan realize that there are personal consequences for what he chose to do to Alina. That any trust she had in him is gone, and now he has to live with those consequences. Consent is important. So there you have it. For me, in this case, the TV show obviously wins. I really wanted to like the book because of how much I enjoyed the show, but then when I read the book and saw how problematic it was, I just couldn't fully enjoy it. Before I go, I did promise to tell you who I stan and who I ship. So here you go. In the book, I stan. In the show, I stan. In the book, I ship no one. No one. Well, okay, that's not entirely true. I did really enjoy Jenya and David in the book and thought they were adorable. In the show, I actually ship both Melina and Darklina. I definitely kind of want the scenario that the Darkling mentions, where Alina gets to spend Mal's life with Mal, and then ends up living the rest of her existence with the Darkling. But only if the Darkling gets a good redemption story arc, that he survives, which I find unlikely. Even though I didn't really enjoy the book, I do plan on continuing to read the series. I did like it enough for that. But I'm probably going to wait to find out if there will be a season 2. And that way I can do another one of these videos for you. So what did you think? Did you like the TV show better than the book like I did? Or do you still stand the book? Let me know down in the comments below, although if you could, because I haven't read the rest of the books, keep spoilers out of it, I would really appreciate it. Of course, please like, comment, and subscribe, and let's see what stories tomorrow brings.